This question is from paragraph summary, and as you know, the instruction is quite simple that a paragraph is given to you, and you have four options. You have to pick the option or the choice that correctly captures the essence of this paragraph. So you have to capture the essence of the paragraph, and then you have to mark the choice that is the best in terms of capturing the essence, right? So let's read the paragraph. It says the early optimism about sports deterrent effects on delinquency. Delinquency basically means a criminal tendency or crime. So in simple words for me, delinquency means crime. Or the early optimism about sports deterrent effects on delinquency was premature, as researchers failed to find any consistent relationship between sports participation and deviance. Deviance from what? Deviance from crime. So the author seems to start the paragraph with the result of something. He says that the early optimism was premature, and this optimism was about what? The early optimism about sports deterrent effects on what? Crime tendency. And this was premature. Why? Because researchers failed to find any consistent relationship between sports participation and the deviance, in the sense that deterrence from, getting into crime. So the optimism was premature because there was no relationship. As the initial studies were based upon cross sectional data and the effects captured were short term, it was problematic to test and verify the temporal sequencing of events suggested by the deterrence theory. So, the deterrence theory suggested something, and there was a problem in it. What was the problem? To test and verify the temporal sequencing. The correlation between sport and delinquency could not be disentangled, in a sense that the correlation could not be brought out clearly. Could not be disentangled, basically means could not be brought out clearly. From what? From class and cultural variables known. And then the author further says that choosing individuals to play sports in the first place was problematic, which became more acute in the subsequent decades, as researchers began to document just how closely sports participation was linked to social indicators. So the author says choosing individuals to play sports in the first place was problematic, which became more acute in the subsequent decades as researchers began to document just how closely sports participation was linked to social class indicators. So if you read the passage, you will find that there are lots and lots of words, but there is one clear thing coming out openly, and that is that there was a research, and this research brought some kind of optimism, and that optimism was premature because of the reasons given. It says here, as the initial studies were based on cross-sectional data, it was problematic to test and verify the temporal sequencing. The correlation could not be disentangled. Choosing individuals to play sports in the first place was problematic. So the author seems to be giving the reason as to why the earlier optimism was slightly premature, because of lots of problems with the data and with the empirical thing. So there was some kind of premature optimism pertaining to what? Pertaining to sports deterrent effect on delinquency, or rather participation in sports and its impact on delinquency, in the sense that sports participation takes you away from or deters you from getting into crime. So the optimism was premature because of lots of reasons concerning what? The data and the test methods, and lots of problems were there with what they had done earlier. So let's look at the options. It says sports participation is linked to class and cultural variables such as education. But sports participation is not linked to this, but it is linked to basically delinquency. And this linking was premature. So sports participation versus what? Tendency to do crime. That is the focus of the passage, not class and cultural variables. So sports participation and its impact on moving away from crime is what the passage discusses, and that was basically premature. Contradicting the previous optimism, later researchers have proved there is no consistent relationship between sports and participation. So this looks a very good choice. Why it says contra, but is it contradicting the previous optimism? And where do you get these later researchers? The point is, you are contradicting the previous optimism. You're not contradicting, you are questioning the previous optimism. There is a difference between questioning and contradicting. So it says that statistical and empirical weaknesses stand in the way of inferring any relationship between sports deviation and participation. I mean, sports participation and deviance. Now, how is 3 better than 2? You must look at certain things. Nothing has been proven as yet. The author says that the early optimism was premature. Why? Because lots of things could not happen. It says that it was problematic to test and verify the temporal sequencing. That's why we could not go ahead. It was problematic because the cultural variables could not be disentangled from lots of things. Choosing individuals was a problem. So we could not go ahead and confirm this. So the authors is basically saying that the confirmation part could not go ahead because of lots of problem with statistical and empirical weakness rather than contradicting. So there are two problems. The author is not contradicting. He says that the optimism was premature. What do you mean by premature? Premature means it's too early. So when you say that something has happened prematurely, means something has happened too early. So the optimism might be there, but the optimism is too early. But when you say contradicting the optimism, basically means there is no optimism, or rather than you are going against and you're saying that there is no optimism. And secondly, later researchers have proved, they have proven nothing. They have simply said that unless that there are certain issues, and those issues are what? Pertaining to the data, pertaining. So we have three, which is better than two, because the author is not contradicting. The author is saying that you have prematurely come to a conclusion. We have to give some more time. We have to test it more. We have to understand the data, and then only we can come to the conclusion. So there is no contradiction, firstly. And then the statistical and the empirical weakness is what the author seems to be talking about in the entire paragraph. If you look at this paragraph has two parts. The first part is the statement, which is the assertion given by the author. And then why was it premature? Why? Because of lots of data and statistical issues. So option 3 is capturing that. It is capturing the statistical and the empirical weakness, which is very much there in the second part of the paragraph. The second part of the paragraph seems to be talking about the correlation, and then the temporal sequencing and the cross-sectional data, and then there was choosing individuals to play sports was a problem. So you have to capture all these things, and all these things are nothing but what? Statistical and empirical weaknesses, which are coming in way of what? Inferring any relationship between sports and participation. And fourth is there is direct relationship between sport participation and delinquency. There is no relationship. The relationship has not yet been proven. And if there is any relationship, it is between sports participation and deviance, and not delinquency. Deviance from delinquency rather than delinquency. So 4 is exactly opposite of what the passage seems to be suggesting. 3 is the best choice and the right answer.